My name is Carl Sawatsky. On behalf of CTC Train Canada, I'd like to welcome all of you to today's webinar on what's new in Visual Studio 2017. What better way to spend a rainy Friday afternoon? So again, with every new version that comes along, we know that it comes with a lot of promise, but it also comes with a lot of questions. And often these questions are at a personal level. If you're a developer, you might be wondering, will this make me more productive? Will it make life easier for me? I know we're all interested in that. So to help us answer those questions, that timely what's in it for me, we have with us today Christian Malboeuf. Christian has been an IT professional for 20 plus years, instructing with us here at CTC Train Canada for over 10 years. So very well equipped to answer that question for us on Visual Studio 2017, not just what the new features are, but how they can really help us. So we're certainly looking forward to what Christian has to present for us. So again, thank you all for joining. And without further ado, I'll pass the word over to Christian, who will help us to learn what's new in Visual Studio 2017.
Perfect. All right, thank you, Carl. So yes, welcome to this little webinar here showing off some of the new features available in Visual Studio 2017. Microsoft has made a lot of effort and has listened to a lot of feedback from the developing community and what they've added in this version of Visual Studio. Essentially, they wanted to make easier, and again, listening to feedback for code navigation, being able to not just get from point A to point B through your various files in your mini projects, but to be able to see, again, the calling stack, what gets referenced by what, how many times, and so forth, so you can navigate up and down the call tree of your application. They've also made a lot of enhancements, excuse me, and given us tools here to ensure code quality as we code, right? For example, live unit testing, which is a great feature to have around. So essentially the compiler is constantly on a certain cycle running tests as you code, and should you be typing something that breaks a certain unit test, you'll find out almost immediately as the compiler keeps up and makes the compilations to run the tests for you. Gives you a visual indication saying, hey, what you're typing here is breaking a test, and you can, again, react to that and be proactive about it. Okay. Behind the scenes, also, Microsoft has made a lot of changes in how fast projects and other items will load in Visual Studio. This is nothing that we work with inherently, but it's just there in the background. The speed of loading up, especially large solutions that have a high number of projects in them. We do have quick loading available now, or light loading, where you could load up a solution, for example, with 80 projects in it, and the reduction in time is usually down by half what it used to take for all the projects to initialize and be ready. So Visual Studio becomes responsive a lot quicker. Also, when we build, when we run unit tests, all of those processes have been improved as far as speed goes. So that's always nice to have, so we can get to work quickly. Okay, they've also made a lot of advancements, which I'll show here. In essence, again, to navigation, based on feedback. When I'm typing with Intellisense, I want a bit more hints as to what it is I'm about to type. Give me better options, give me better choices, give me smarter choices. Don't just list everything alphabetically based on how you find it. Keep it in context of where I am, what I'm typing, and what object I'm currently referring to, and offer me the right choices in Intellisense. And there's a lot of filters that have been added as well in many places, so we can look just at functions, just at events, just at properties as we type. And they're all keyboard shortcutted, so if you are a person who relies heavily on keyboard shortcuts as you type, you'll feel right at home because they have provided them for all of these new features. Okay, so we'll start off with some simple demonstrations here of the features they've added here. For example, run to click, right, which is a new feature they're advertising a lot for when they are introducing debugging, okay, in there. Let me see if I can share my screen here and make sure I pick the right monitor for it. Yes, thank you. All right, So I've got Visual Studio Enterprise 2017 over here loaded up, and I will open up one of the projects we have over here, which is just an ASP.NET MVC application over there. Okay, let's bring up the Solution Explorer here. Okay, in this particular example here, if I simply build this project as is, okay, and then just go ahead and run it. Okay, thank you. What we'll see here is a typical welcome page for an MVC app with a carousel and a couple of other links and information. There we go. All right, so learn how to build ASP.NET apps that can run anywhere. All right, and the carousel will simply go from one place to the other after a certain time, or I can interact with it. All right, Visual Studio, packages, so forth. That's fine. I would like to insert some breakpoints in there and see what's going on. So let's pin this down here. Thank you. Let's say in my home controller over here for this one, I would like to put a breakpoint, let's say, on the about action over here. So I'd like to break at this point and break the execution. So I'll go ahead here and put a breakpoint in there. Okay. And if I run the code and ask for the about action on the home controller, we'll be able to demonstrate the run to click feature, which is basically a replacement of temporary breakpoints. We had to create them, stop there, and then eventually remove them when we were done. Well, now we can do away with that. There we go. Okay, so I'm breaking here at this stage, and you'll notice as I mouse over each line, there's now a little glyph that appears on the left-hand side next to the line where I can say run to click. Okay, so basically run up to this line and wait for me there. Okay. As I do this, once I've clicked on that line to run to click, I can see here some performance information. How long did it take for that line to run? Okay, less than a millisecond. And if I click on that link, I can now get further diagnostic information about the calls that were made, memory used, so forth. And that could also be a good debugging tool if you are profiling your application for performance. Okay, so that's interesting. So we get to see here the IntelliTrace events, any exceptions that have happened, right, in this little chart there. And we can even take a snapshot of this, enable CPU profiling if you want to have that for the threads involved and so forth. Okay, great stuff in there. Okay, and I'll just stop debugging here. Okay, as such, so run to click, great to have around. Okay, no need to have temporary breakpoints. Okay, and it gives, again, profiling information for those steps, which is great. Okay. As far as the presentation of code now goes, there's a few other changes that have happened here. You may notice these lines that I have here linking my opening and closing curly braces, which some people have asked for, and now we have in here. They essentially allow you to see, again, with better clarity, which opening brace matches which closing brace, but also more than that, especially when they go off the screen and you can't see where they came from, mousing over the line itself will tell you which section of code that is for. Right? So these curly braces right now that are highlighted are for the about action that I have, okay, in this controller. And if I mouse a little bit further out, oh, this is the actual home controller class curly braces we're looking at. And finally, at the very end here, that's probably the namespace one. Yeah, the namespace over there that begins the entire file in question. Right? So those are kind of neat to have around, especially if you have long-reaching code in there that goes beyond the screen and you're not exactly sure in which particular item you happen to be in at the moment. Just mousing over those connector lines will give you insight on where you are. Okay, if you don't like them, you can turn them off as well. Okay, in the options. Okay, if you want to, over here. Okay, that would be in the generic text editor. Yeah, the structure guidelines over here is what they are. Okay, so you can turn those on or off in the general settings of the text editor, not for any particular language per se, but just in general here we can turn off the structure guidelines. Okay, it's a feature you may or may not choose to have, but for those who want to get a visual sense of where they are or have a map in their mind of where they are, Okay, that's a good indicator in there, and a lot of people have welcomed that addition in there. Okay. Navigation-wise as well, since we're here, some of you may be familiar with this, Control comma, for example, which was the go to all, right? So over here we can do that as well. Under Edit, go to all. It's Control T. There's also Control comma, which will do it as well. So for go to all, for example, I can type something in here related to this project or any project in the solution, like the word start, for example, and I get to see here everything that's got the word start in it, right? So I've got the startup class, for example, that I'm looking at right now. If I cursor down, right, there's the startup method, okay, public startup method here in my class startup. Okay, we've got the file startup.cs. Each one of those, by the way, is opened up in a quick preview, right, on the right-hand side of the visual environment. And there's view start as well, right, my template for my views in this application. Okay, of course, if I press enter on any of these, right, like the startup method, and press enter, it'll put the focus on that and bring it out of temporary view into an actual open tab, right? But there's also filtering now available in there as well. If I bring it up again with Control T, right, go to all, I can filter this by type. Just show me the types that have the word startup. Oh, well, you have a startup class. Okay, that's cool. How about showing me the files involved? Oh, yeah, startup.cs is the file, right? So you can filter it by what you want. How about some members or methods, right? So here we are. Okay. Notice that they're prepended or prefixed with a certain letter in front, right? M startup. I could have typed that in my search. M space startup, looking only for members, right? Or T for type, right? Or again, F for files, right? So those are there, okay, if you want to. So just by typing the right type of search, prepending it with a certain character, you can search specifically for certain items. It's pretty awesome, okay, to have that in there to allow us to quickly navigate to certain things, okay, within the solution that we're in. Great. Okay. So nice little additions there that they've done to the UI to allow us to get around a bit more easily, right, into the system. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I'll go to live unit testing, okay, as well. I'll create a few new classes in there. It'll allow me to show off some other interface design changes as well as live unit testing. So let me close this solution here for a moment. Okay, and I'll make an entirely new project. Again, the start page has now moved to the file menu. Okay, for those who want to know. Okay, it used to be in the view menu. It's now in the file menu, start page. And it also remembers the types of projects you've worked on in the past. Oh, you've worked on a console app before. Would you like to make a new console app, right? Or you can search for them over here. So just by typing console, I can get a filter and look at what I've got over here. So a console app for .NET Core, right, which would be suitable on devices such as Linux, for example, Windows devices, whatnot. A console app in .NET Framework, okay, and another one here as well in VB. Okay, so I'll go for the C# one, okay, and I'll call it here webinar demo. Okay, good stuff. So it starts me off here with my main. Okay, we can see again how many references there are to each one of these things. There's no code calling any of these things yet. Okay, that's fine. And I'm going to create another class under here as well. This will be my math class, which I want to test with my live unit testing later on. I'll make it, let's make it static. There we go. Oops, class my math. Hold on. Thank you. Like so, and let's put in there a few things, an add and subtract method. Okay. So give me A and B, and I will add them together. Okay, thank you. All right. And let's do the same thing for sub. go. Perfect. All right, so there's a nice little class that I've created for myself. It's the MyMath class, right? Got two methods in it. The entire compilation engine has been rewritten from scratch in 2017, which also means that we have new refactoring abilities. For example, here, right-clicking, right, or just clicking on my math. I've got a light bulb over here with suggestions on what I can do or quick actions for it. And if I take a look at it, it says, yeah, you've got a class here inside another project. Would you like to move MyMath into its own file? Please. Right, I'll call it mymath.cs, and here's the code that'll be affected by it. I can say, sure, let's move that out of my program.cs and move it into its own file, because I plan on reusing my math maybe for other things later on. So do that, please. So it takes it out of there and moves it into mymath.cs as is. Okay, so that's nice as well. Okay, and a way to clean up your code or make it more legible. Okay, they've also changed the relationship between the file names and the object names themselves. It used to be one way, okay, like this. For example, if I rename the file mymath.cs, right, to something else, some of you may have done this before. If I choose to rename it to my other math, okay, .cs, let's type that properly. My other math.cs over here, it will ask me, hey, do you want to change the name of your class as well? Because now your class is called mymath, yet your file name is my other math. Would you like to rename this as well? Yes, of course, this was always there, right? So now my other math is the name of the class. Well, now it goes the other way around as well. If I choose to change the name of my type back to my math, right, I've got little underlines here or a little dotted line around it, which means there's a suggestion about it, which is available here with the light bulb. Okay, and the quick action here is, would you like to rename the file back to mymath.cs? Well, yeah, sure, of course, I'd like to keep them in sync, and it'll do the renaming for me. Okay, so now it goes in both directions, something that wasn't there before. Okay, so that's kind of nice to have as well. Okay, good. Let's see. Yeah, so as is over here, I would like to test the code for this, right? So does add and subtract, do they work as expected? So what I can do here, of course, is right-click on my class, mymath, and choose to create unit tests for this. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay. We have different testing frameworks over here. Okay, I'll use the new one, V2, accept all the defaults for the rest. Okay, so we've got here a new project creating for testing purposes. Of course, they're both set to fail by default, so I'll have to put in some code here for what to do if I want to run my add test. I'll say that result is equal to my math class over here, calling .add with 3 and 4. Okay, as such. And I'll have to assert if I'm getting the results I expect. So let's use the assert class over here. Is it true that 7 is equal to the result? Okay, if that is true, then the test will pass. If it's not true, then obviously there's something wrong in my add code because we're not getting the expected result of 7 with 3 and 4. Okay. I'll leave my sub-test to fail for now. Okay, so we can see one that actually fails. Okay, and let's bring up the results window over here. Okay, show me my test explorer. Okay, very good. Let me do a build so we can have that in there. Okay, so I've got 2 tests here that I've not run yet. Okay, that's fine. And in the older, I wouldn't say the older, but in the current way that we do things, I can run my tests through here. Okay, or right-click and choose to run my tests as well. So I'll run them from here. One should pass and one should fail. Obviously, the add test has succeeded. We did get the result of 7. My sub-test has failed. It's not being tested per se right now. It just returns fail automatically. And of course, now we could go back into add, make some changes, reiterate through it, run the tests again. Oh, the test is now broken, or the test has failed, so I've broken the method. Go back and fix it, run some tests again. And it's an ongoing iterative process that ends once we're satisfied with the code that we have. Wouldn't it be nice, though, if in semi-real time if someone comes in here, decides to poke around and make changes to my add method, and almost immediately I could say, hey, you are breaking this test that is now failing based on what you just typed. And I don't have to run the test to do that. It continuously runs the test for me in the background when changes happens. So it's not instantaneous. There's a few delay of a few seconds, but you're notified immediately almost that what you're doing here is breaking an actually test that has passed before. All right, so to do that, we can go to live unit testing, okay, which is available in Enterprise. Okay, live unit testing, I can tell it to start, and after a few moments, my interface will change, says, okay, so this particular method here has passed. This one is failing, okay. If I go into my math over here, I can see this add method is passing its tests, right? This sub method, there's a minus here, it has no test. All we do is assert.fail. There's no code that's been written to test this particular method, and that's identified there by the minus sign, okay? The plus sign would say that there's a test for this, but we haven't run it yet, and the check mark, of course, means that we are passing just fine. Okay, a red X, of course, will signify that we're failing, which is exactly what would happen here if somebody came in and decided to add a bit of their own code, right? And after a few seconds, the compiler, oh no, you can't pass this. This is not working anymore. You've made a change to the function, so it's no longer available to you. Okay, like so. So again, immediately I can tell that this particular change in my code is breaking what add is supposed to do, and it's no longer working as intended. Okay, and for you, this could be great. If you need to do this, this is awesome, whatnot. Some people have complained, actually, when this feature first came out in beta testing. Some people said, yeah, I know, I'm editing this method. It's going to take me a day to make the changes I want, and I don't want to be told every 5 seconds that what I'm doing is breaking the method. I'm not done running it yet or typing it. So when I'm done, then you can tell me that it's okay. So to avoid that from happening, we have a chance of temporarily turning it off for a certain function, for example, right? So if I go back into my test project over here, for add test, right, if I right-click it, under live tests, I can choose to temporarily exclude the add method, so I'm not going to be bothered by live testing telling me that what I'm typing right now is breaking it. I'm not done writing it yet. It's going to take me all day to do it, so keep bothering me. Stop bothering me about it. I don't want to see it. Okay. You can also do it globally at the testing menu at the top here for live unit testing. You can pause it altogether for all tests, or choose to stop it if you want, and that will stop it for the entire project that you're in there. Okay. If I go back into my code here and undo the change that I've done, after a few seconds, the compiler picks that up and runs the test for me, and okay, we pass again. Great. Okay, so that could be a great feature to have around in there in development to make sure, especially for small to medium changes, to know right away if this implementation is breaking what we've already established before. Okay, and that's kind of neat. Okay, good. All right. Well, since we're here, let me turn that off now. Since we're here, let's stop the live unit testing. Thank you. When you're working on objects such as these are improvements to Intellisense as well. Let me go back into my program over here. Okay. Okay, like so. With Intellisense now, as I type dot, we have some choices, right? There's some filtering that's been added as well. Notice these icons at the bottom now. They're all shortcutted as well. Show me just the properties, please. Great. Okay. Show me just the events for the console class. Okay. Whoops. Let's turn off the other one. Just the events. Okay. Or just show me the methods involved. Okay. Over here. So you can focus on that. Okay. And there's Alt-P for properties, V for events, and M for methods in there. Okay. Available to you. And as you type, right, for example, read, you can press dot, right, instead of tab to get to the next level. Okay, so that's another little shortcut there you can implement into your into your coding practices. So instead of hitting tab to complete, then pressing dot, you can press dot right away, which will auto-complete and bring you to the next level. And one feature I'm starting to warm up to myself is the capitalization, right? I would like, read line. Okay, I could type R-E-A-D-L, right, to pick up read line. I can also use RL. Right? So with the capitalization for camel casing, read line has a capital R, capital L. It knows now instantly that this is what I'm talking about. Okay, cute little things they've added in there that could again increase your productivity or your performance in coding if that's something you're concerned about. Okay, so nice little cosmetic changes there to just make it easier once you get into the coding zone and you're quickly going through your commands. These are all little shortcuts that you could find useful, okay, on day-to-day coding scenarios. Okay, good stuff. Let's see. Yes. Over here, let me just use var here instead of string. Var is something I use often myself. I typically dislike doing things like this. Let's say, just for argument's sake, client, new client is equal to a new client. Okay, so I don't like reading that kind of stuff. I know I'm creating a client object. I shouldn't have to specify the type here, so I often use var, okay, for that. And I can even enforce this if I want to. Right? Using the quick launch over here, if I take a look at my code style over here, okay, I can go into my text editor over here. Let's say for C# for my coding style, I can specify if I want to use, for example, the word this. Right? If I use the word this, or if I want to enforce using the word this, should I make it an error if I don't use it, for example, right? Or a warning if I don't use the word this. Right? And there's other things for the word var, for members, and so forth. So var for built-in types, right? I prefer var, and if I don't use it, give that to be an error. So if I don't use var, it'll give me an error while it tries to produce, it'll underline it in red, or give me a warning. Okay, so I can enforce certain practices or policies at the office. If we have a certain adherence to a certain standard, we can specify that. Right? All interfaces must begin with the letter I in lowercase, for example. Right? You can enforce that as well and display it as a warning or an error if need be. Okay, it's all into the coding style for what it is you're working with. Okay. Let's see. Another feature as well, which is new and some people are starting to work with, and in fact, before I get into that, this is nothing new with Visual Studio per se, but it's a new feature of C#7. I just thought I'd mention it here while we're looking at it. Essentially, string interpolation or extrapolation. Interpolation, I think, is the proper name for it, if you want to use that feature. I want to do a console right line over here. I should use the, not Windows left. There's my shortcut. It's not Windows left, it's right line that I'm looking for. Thank you. Okay, like so. I could specify, for example, the message of the day is, and then I could concatenate that with my variable here, greeting, that I created earlier, like so. There's now another way to get around these details. Let me make some more space here. Thank you. There's another way to get around those now. It's to use string interpolation, where I'll use a $, okay, like so, and put my string in there and specify the message of the day is, and then just put my variable name, greeting, okay, in here. Okay, and that will be the continuation of what I want. So that's another syntax now that we have. We could use the string formatter and use a 0 here where greeting used to be. Put a 0 there, then a comma, then greeting. Now we can combine it all in one shot with the $ for the string interpolation. So essentially this is a throwback to Unix shell scripting, really. $name or $var or $, whatever. In this case, $greeting is what I'm looking for, right? And that will substitute the value in there for me and display it on the screen, okay, as such. There. Okay, so give me a console read line. If I run this as is, okay, the message of the day is hello, as you can see right there. Okay, great. Okay, so that's string interpolation. This is not a feature of Visual Studio. It's a feature of C# version 7, the newest feature there. And I'm starting to see it a lot out there in production. People are warming up to it, and it makes it a little bit more concise. And it's also very legible, okay, to see what's going on in there. Now, when it comes to other preferences for, again, display purposes, yeah, take a look here. If I go into my quick launch and look for tabs, okay, in C# editor for tabs, tab by default inserts 4 spaces, okay, which is not the tab character, but rather 4 spaces instead. I could also change it into an actual tab character. Now you can view the spaces if you want. Again, in the quick launch, just do a search for white space. Okay, so view the white spaces, turn it on or off. I'll just click it here, and now I can view the white spaces. And as I tab, you'll notice I'm adding 4 spaces every time. There's 4 dots that appear, right? So it's always 4 spaces that I'm adding in there. I can change that if I want to into an actual tab character. Let me go back into my quick launch here and search for tabs. So in the text editor for C# tabs, I can say keep the tabs in there. Okay. Now when I press tab at a certain line, I see an actual tab character, which is the 4 spaces, but it's not 4 individual spaces. It is a tab character. Now, you might say, this is great. I want to use this tab feature. But if I enable it again at this level, right, with the tabs, it's for the entire Visual Studio for the C# editor. I just want to have tabs for this particular project or file that I'm in. Whoever's working on that file prefers to have tabs instead of spaces, and there was no way before to really make that change to an individual file or a certain place in a project. Well, now we can. Let me turn it back into a space, for example, here, okay, and prove that if I hit tab now, I've got spaces instead. Okay, that's great. Let's bring it back to what it was. Oops, thank you. All right, here we are. For this particular document, I would like in program.cs to have tabs specifically for that project there. So in this project webinar demo, which is where program.cs is, I will simply add a file. Okay, a new item. It'll be a text file. Let me just search for those. Yeah, so it's a text file over here, and it must have the following name, .editor config. Okay, and those of you who work in Unix will know what a dot file is. A file that starts with a dot is usually a hidden file, okay, from the shell, and you can see that we're borrowing that from the Unix environment. So .editor config stored in this project, I can then specify what I'm looking for. Okay, so root is equal to true. Okay, let's get that over here. Okay, so root is equal to true, thank you. And specifically for the C#, okay, type, like so. For anything.cs, I could have put a specific file name in there, by the way, if I wanted to target just one file, but for all C# files, the indent style will now be set to a tab. Okay, I can save that, like so. There is now a .editor config part of this project which targets all C# files to use tab as their indent style, regardless of what the tab is set to in my editor properties. The editor will now read this file last, and that's the change that applies. Okay, I believe we'll have to restart the whole thing and reload the project. Let me save everything, close the solution, and reopen it. Okay. Okay, so there we are. If I go into my program.cs, which was currently set to use spaces now, when I tab over, notice they're all changed to tabs now. Okay, so it's reading the file as is, right, and it's using that for those types of files. Other file types, not .cs, will not read this format, and they'll stick to spaces, okay, in there. Okay, so again, little changes here that they can implement. Let me get rid of the white space display as well, because that's annoying after a while. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so now they're all gone. Okay. Let's see. A couple of other things here that we could show as well. If I right-click anywhere in my code and try to find all references to something, okay, I can search in the entire solution and so on and so forth what I want. So, for example, let me pick a better project for that, or maybe a better file. If I look at class myMath, let's find all references. Okay, we find it here in the class myMath. It's also used in the myMath test and so forth. I can now group the results by project then definition, or by definition only, right? Or by definition then project, or path, project then path. So there's different ways to group it. You can even group it by file once you have enough of these, right? To find out which file they're in and so forth. That for larger projects with lots of items in them, this makes it very easy to sift down through the references for each items in there. Okay, so I find that a great addition also for navigation. Okay, good. And as far as the event handler goes, let's call sub, and let's make a exception over here. Do we have these ones? No, I don't have them in here. Okay, I'll just go with system.exception for now. Okay. Index out of range exception, for example. Okay, like so. Okay, so we have a new exception handler in there, okay, if need be. And I'll put that, for example, in a, well, I'll leave it like that. Okay. So let me go into my program.cs here and call one of these things. Okay. Oops. Oops, 5 and 2, like so. Okay. And let's use the feature now that I've just demonstrated a while ago. So let's use the string interpolation, like so. Thank you. And I wonder if it'll pick it up as a choose. Do I need to use toString for it? Thank you. All right. So resolve toString. There we go. Perfect. Making sure we have it all in there. And what else is missing? Thank you. Okay. Great. Got it in there here, and this will throw an exception, of course. Let's go ahead and run this. Or at least it should have. Where is my exception? It's oh, we return. That's right. So I'll just put that down below here. Thank you. There we go. Let's make sure we hit the exception first. Thank you. I know it's never going to hit that code, but that's fine. So here's the new exception handler display, okay, that we have over here. And it's a little floating box now. The index was outside the bounds of the array. That's the exception I chose. I can choose to view the details here at this stage, okay, to see what's going on, reevaluate, add a watch for that in a certain watch window. Right? I can copy the details so I can work with them later, and I can view the exception settings, and again, break when this exception type is thrown, except when it's thrown from a certain project in the solution that we have, right? Open the exception settings and also edit the condition, okay? Only break when a certain predicate here is met, okay? The module is equal or not equal to this name. You can add more conditions, and you can also open the exception settings down below here and edit them. Okay, so it's a new interface that they've come up with for handling and dealing with unhandled exceptions. Okay, giving you a bit more flexibility into how they're being used. Okay, good stuff. All right. So I think that just about covers the new features I wanted to show you here for Visual Studio 2017, as far as the interface changes that have happened, the live unit testing, of course, which you saw there, which is a great addition, right? The ability to refactor certain items, and the auto suggestions that often come up for refactoring, which will appear now as a light bulb on the left-hand side. When there's a more efficient way to code something, it will often suggest it, like moving an entire section of code into its own file to clean up the code, that sort of thing. Okay. So we can open it up now for a question period for anybody who would have questions about Visual Studio in general. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. Well, it seems like we have nothing coming in here, so we'll let the presentation run a little bit longer in case somebody does have a question to type, okay, that we can answer. Okay, if not, I hope that you will find this lecture a good primer on what's new as far as the interface goes for Visual Studio 2017. Some of the small advancements they've made that go a long way to make us more efficient coders, save ourselves some time, being able to react to code changes effectively and quickly. All in the end of.
Thank you. Yeah, that was fantastic, Christian. Yeah, no questions have yet come in. So,
okay.
I mean, if you have we have a couple more minutes. I'm not sure if you've covered all the features you want, or.
Yeah, I've pretty much gone through everything. It went a little bit quicker than I thought. The system here was well set up and so forth. So yeah. That's
never a bad thing. So thank you very much. Yeah, like you said, that helped us to see not only what the features are, but how we can use them, how they can help us out. So again, thank you, Christian.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a good rest of the day and an excellent weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you.